Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and/or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what it is they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or, as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Today, I'm excited to welcome one such leader in Tim Hinchey. I certainly hope you enjoy. Well, this is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and I'm very excited to have Tim Hinchey on the phone today. He was referred to me by a very close friend of mine, Steve Paul, and when Steve referred him, he knew that I was looking for leaders who actually lead with heart, who are more emotionally intelligent, and Steve said, you know what, I've got just the leader for you. And I know that you have had some challenges, Tim, coming forward, but I'm excited to hear, though, that you are someone who leads with the heart in any journey that you're on. So welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Heather.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey? Where are you in your career?
Well, thanks for asking. I am basically on month number 10 in my newest position, which is President and CEO of USA Swimming. So the national governing body for our sport in the United States. So that basically means from kind of our grassroots, 400,000 members across the country at 3,000 swim clubs, all the way to our Olympic team. So it's a sport that I grew up in, a sport that I participated in college. So it was amazing to get a call just over a year ago to join the organization.
Well, that's very exciting. And that's a move, because you were with the Colorado Rapids prior to that, correct?
Correct. I've been in professional sports for over 25 years, and most recently I was president of the Colorado Rapids for the last 6 years.
Nice. Awesome. And I have just a total side note. I have a kiddo who is playing for the Rapids Select program right now. He's 7.5 years old, and we're really enjoying it. So yeah, it's a great organization. You built something great while you're there, for sure.
Well, he's at the right club. That's great to hear.
So, when we think about being a leader, some people don't, we can be leaders without titles, of course. And I'm obviously referring to people who have a title of literally just like supervisor or above. And sometimes they're executive leaders and sometimes they're more frontline leaders. But what is it for you, that drives you to lead? Does that come from someplace? Did it start from somewhere? What is it that motivates you to be the leader?
That's a great question. And I'm sure everyone has their own understanding and journey to get to where they've been. I think mine started just early. I think, my father has been a really important figure in my life. I'm named after him. I'm Timothy III. He was a very successful executive and a terrific father. He put himself through private school in South Side of Chicago, went to the University of Notre Dame, participated in ROTC scholarship for Navy, became a naval officer, received one of the highest medals for heroism during his tours in Navy, and just again was an incredible executive for over 25 years with Pacific Bell in California, and yet at the same time, was focused, was very spiritual. Grew up in an Irish Catholic family. He did everything. He coached some of my teams. He'd work hard, but he'd make a priority, and we never felt as a family anything but a priority to him. And yet he was an incredibly successful executive. So I think early on, his discipline, his engagement, watching him speak in front of groups, watching him do things for our family was certainly something I think that it certainly fell across to my desk. I think growing up in sports in particular, and especially as I got into swimming later, him sitting down with me and setting goals and opportunities. And again, I think all that's all part of the makeup of who we are, I think, as leaders when you get that at an early age from your parents. And then as I got to college and joined swim teams, it always felt natural to want to be one of the captains or be part of the group. And even though I wasn't the most successful swimmer by any means, I always felt like I could contribute through leadership opportunities. So I think that all became natural. And then once I got into sports, I just wanted to manage. I wanted to lead teams. And again, so it was something I've always wanted to do. And to be fair, it's probably why I moved around so much early in my career. I was very blessed to be recruited by several organizations, because I realized that if you could manage people and successfully drive revenue for your owners, you'd have a spot somewhere. So I think that's a big part of what has constructed who I am as a personality, and certainly as a leader today.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. I mean, a lot of people talk about their parents, one or the other, or both. And I kind of think of that for myself. I had my grandmother, I had my mother, and they both were very strong women, very kind of independent and really hard workers. And so they really formed my work ethic and my value system really early on. And a lot of what they said, like a mother used to always tell me, Heather, always take the higher ground, never stoop to someone else's level. And it's interesting because in the workplace, as a leader, I've been a leader at teams for years and years too. It's pretty much all I've ever done. In that space, there were always times where I could have stooped, where I could have gone out for revenge, where I could have done something right with a coworker or somebody who was just getting underneath my skin. And I always remembered that kind of sage piece of advice that she gave me really was, always trying to take the higher ground. And so, it's just one of the things that sticks with me. So I think that's interesting that you say that. The other thing is this idea or this deep desire to want to lead people, to want to lead teams. I hear that a lot from very successful leaders. It's almost innate. So people will say too, okay, because I'm a leader. I actually am a leadership development person. So I help organizations in that space. And so someone asked me one time, so do you think that a leader is born like that everybody can be emotionally intelligent and everybody can have a high level of desire to empathize with others? And what I said to him is, there are those who naturally lead. There are those who are kind of born to be that way. They have these natural kind of EQ things in their space, right? And then there are those who have to work a little harder, but they can be taught. They can be taught to do it, but you have to want to do it. And so he accepted that answer, but at first he was like, I don't know if I agree with that. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that?
It's funny because I've certainly heard that question before. Are they born or can they be made? And I think that I do absolutely think they're born. Having said that, I think it's also our responsibilities, if we are leaders, to find opportunities and platforms to help people get better, to help people improve. And if we are good leaders, then helping people become better managers in particular, or at least leaders of their area of their business or whatever aspect of life is important, I still think that can happen as well. And I think that we'd be remiss not to find ways to engage with those people. And if we're fortunate enough to be seen as natural leaders, then again, I still think it's our responsibility to pass that forward and pass that on as much as possible. So I think it's a combination of both. But again, I've always felt like I was willing to take a little risk and put myself out there. And whether it was in-class president, whether it was captains of sports teams, whether it was individual project leaders, it was always something I was comfortable doing.
How much do you think sports, when you think of sports, we think of competitive, right? So how much of that kind of just ingrained desire to lead was just there, like you said, from like your father kind of being a sportsman and in the naval and all of that? That's another thing. And the military is definitely, you think of competitive and someone who's maybe more dominant. How much of that do you think plays into that just desire to go out for everything and put yourself out there and like take more risks?
Well, I think it plays at least I put a huge amount of credit into that philosophy, primarily because, and just to go back to what you said a minute ago, work ethic is, I think, a huge benefit or result from some of that kind of attitude. And there's no doubt in my mind that discipline, that work ethic, absolutely can come through sports teams, but it can also come through, if you had a music passion or dance or something else, another activity or passion point that allowed you or forced you to be disciplined to be successful. And again, my dad used to always say, lead by example, number one, and number two, nothing replaces hard work. And so if you give it the effort and the opportunity, in most cases, you should find ways to be successful. If you cut corners or don't do all the work and you know it and you're not prepared, then you know the results aren't going to be what you desired, and therefore you're not going to be seen as someone legitimate enough to lead or to manage somebody. So when we hire, I can tell you flat out, when I hire people, I ask about, sports or passion or hobbies or things, again, that, you try to pick up and see if they had that kind of discipline. So it's certainly an important ingredient in my mind to successful leadership.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's like a research study in itself, right? I'm not sure if that's been done, but that would be very interesting to see how many folks have either sports or, like you said, some other discipline or activity that they did that really kind of helped set them up for success later on. So that'd be something I'll keep my eyes out open for.
Sure.
So, how would you define then your leadership style? When you think about that, and when I'm talking about that, I know that you're leading a very large organization, and you did before as well. And so, that's something I am interested in when it comes to kind of the culture of the organization, and then also leading the folks that maybe direct reports to you. What do you consider your style in both areas?
Well, I think first and foremost, I definitely try to provide as much access as possible, and transparency is really important to me. So, as an example, especially as it relates to this organization, and we had a little over 90 people within our organization. Part of my first 100 days, and it's turned out to be, it's taken a little longer than I would have liked, but I am a big Starbucks fan. So people know that about me, and they built one just outside the gates here at the Olympic Training Center. So every single employee had to sign up for a walk with me to go have a coffee or tea on me, not on the company, on Tim. And we got to spend an hour together just to get to know one another. And so I've done 88 of those one-on-ones so far. Again, primarily just so you get to know who's here, who's the guy in the corner office. And a lot of the times, some of my motivation is I don't want to be the jerk in the corner office that thinks he knows what he's doing to lead our company. I want to have a real, authentic relationship with people. So that's first and foremost. And that's, again, I think it's important if you're going to, buy into servant leadership, which I do. And it's about the bottom up versus the top down, and everyone has to have a relationship with me. So I think building those relationships internally can be even more importantly than some of our major external relationships. From a direct report style, again, to me, it's less is more. I inherited more direct reports than I was comfortable with. So we reorganized the organization into 4 key business units. And I have a COO, CMO, CFO, and now a general counsel and vice president of business affairs that report to me. We're known as the strategy team. And I maintain the executive leadership team. I actually added some more division directors to have even more voices on it below us to still be engaging over our divisions. But for me, I want a smaller trust tree, if you will, to make sure that we get more done, that we're thinking more strategically, more long-term, and yet at the same time not taking away from what's really required on the day-to-day annual business. So those are some of the things that we've done here at USA Swimming. And again, I want to be upfront and personal with everybody.
I love that. And one of the things that you said that I thought was really interesting when I think of, CEOs of organizations, one of the things I think they do. So there's the kind of 2 different camps thinking about how small you want to keep that executive leadership team, that camp, that around the table with you so that you can get a lot accomplished and you can keep things close to the vest until you need to roll them out depending on what's happening in the organization. But I like the fact that you said that you include, the folks at the director level kind of up and around that table so that you have more diversity of voices at that table. That means a lot. That's going to help the organization long term, because what happens is often those 3-4 people at the top have, they end up developing kind of this similar voice or the similar mindset. And unless you start to bring folks down some levels that are closer to the problem, closer to the issue, closer to the customer, right, then you start to be unrelatable to the customer. So in this case, going that level down and bringing them in helps to then bring that level down below them, that voice kind of to the table as well. So I think that's a very smart move on your part.
Yeah, I think it's critical, and I think that, again, the more diverse voice we have, the more successful we're going to be in thinking about what our priorities are and how we're engaging with our overall, key stakeholders, our membership base. Because again, some of us aren't involved in those aspects, but we need to understand them and learn them. And again, this gives everyone an opportunity in a safe environment to make some recommendations or ask questions. And I think it's something that we'll continue to build on here, but I'm excited about the future.
I love that idea of the safe environment too. There are studies out there that talk about psychological safety, the way folks want to feel safe. And a big part of helping them feel safe is helping them feel heard and knowing that their voice means something to those that hear them. And so I think that's a really key point as well, that safe environment idea.
Agreed.
So tell the listeners then of a time when maybe you just weren't your best leader. You just knew you weren't the best version of yourself. And it kind of be specific if you have a story. And then how you came out of that. What is it that you did to kind of turn yourself around? Because we all go through these times.
I think that I think in a couple places, and maybe specifically when I took over the Rapids and I got my first job as president, our offices at Dick's Sporting Goods Park are about 8-9 miles away from the Pepsi Center, which is where my bosses were, and Kroenke Sports Entertainment is based. And I think when I got this first job, I was so eager to do the best job I could on behalf of ownership and the strategic leadership team, the executive leadership team at Kroenke Sports, that a lot of times I think I wanted to keep it right in front of me, and I wanted to keep everything together. And I probably wasn't doing a very good job of communicating up. And I think that I probably misunderstood, wanting to be empowered to say, well, now that I'm president, I can make more decisions. I don't need to really check in as much as I've done previously. And I think there were a couple tough times when, I thought I was making the right decisions. I had gone forward and approved some things, and realized that wasn't the protocol for which, my boss and certainly ownership wanted me to happen. And they were good about, kind of the slap on the wrist, if you will. But more importantly, I realized that actually communicating up in and of itself is a huge priority. And what I realized is that if I socialize this early, especially using one-on-ones, which a lot of times we dread sometimes we have with our bosses, and got in front of agendas and communicated some of the things I'd like to do, they bought in faster, and it became more transparent, and it became easier to celebrate and easier to activate and get decisions made, versus trying to kind of be the guy and thinking that I had to do that for my own personality and ego. And instead, again, if I opened up and I offered this opportunity, this two-way input to my bosses, that actually it was not less empowering, it was more empowering. And again, that's something that I wanted to coach, which is, again, no surprises, right? And it's simple, but you got to live it and you got to be prepared to do it. So I really started preparing better for my one-on-ones, thinking ahead of, okay, what do I want to accomplish in the next 30, 60, 90 that I know I want buy-in and input from ownership or the bosses. And again, I got a lot better at communicating up, and I try to teach that now. I'm like, listen, I want you to make good decisions, and I'm okay even with making some mistakes on occasion, but I just don't want surprises. Let's talk about it. It can still be your idea, and you'll still get all the credit, but let's make sure that we're talking about it more often. And it was a real valuable lesson that made the last several years of my tenure there far more successful, and I think that led to more success for the company, and eventually that also led to success for me, and I was named Executive of the Year for the league in 2016. So it can work. And so I think being more communicative, being more open, being willing to take that two-way communication to the next level was a very valuable lesson.
It's interesting that you say that, because I spend a lot of time in the role and the work that I do. I focus on employee engagement, employee loyalty, leadership, but I'm looking at leadership from the top down, like from leaders to their people. And so I don't coach or talk a whole bunch about this, idea of communicating up. I'm mostly talking about communicating down, right? Because what I've found is that most people are doing just fine as far as communicating amongst themselves in the executive office. It's downward and making sure that kind of there's like this alignment and cascading of everything that's happening from upstairs. And so in your case, I appreciate this, and I bet you it took you setting aside a little bit of ego to say, okay, yeah, I am the man, I am the person, right? But at the same time, me alone, I can't just do this all by myself. I need to kind of, like you said, socialize this and have them sniff test whether this is right and is this going to align with everything else we have going on. I think it's brilliant that you have more focus and taking more time to be more cognizant of the one-on-ones and how you're setting those up. And because then if you do that, I agree with you. I think you would set yourself up for success, because what happens, I think, too, is there's like the CMO and the CFO and no one's talking sometimes. And then that goes out and then the troops are like, well, what's going on? Are those people talking upstairs? What's that? What is happening, right? So in your case, you're setting it up to be more successful, less confusion.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't feel like that's what you should be doing, but it really helps you if you can buy into it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you said you have a team now of 90, is that right? 90.
Yeah, our organization here has 90 plus or minus.
Yes. So what do you do? Because let's say you're traveling a lot, or you're just doing a lot of different things, and I'm sure you're doing this all the time. What do you do to kind of reconnect with reconnect with your direct reports, and also just reconnecting, with the organization? The way you talked about having them walk with you, and you're still doing those walk arounds where you walk to Starbucks and kind of have that conversation. That's amazing. What are the other things that you do to help drive that connection when maybe you get a little disconnected from what's happening?
I think we've, the meetings, the strategy team The organization that I inherited would meet about once a month at best. So again, there are a lot of people traveling here. We have events all over the country. We support, all 50 states and 3,000 swim clubs and 400,000 members, like I said. So a lot of people have to travel. All of our events are clearly not here at the Olympic Training Center. So we're on the road quite a bit. So what I've asked is to really make sure that, now that we have the strategy team and the executive leadership team, that we meet twice. Each organization meets at least twice a month. So we're meeting more than we have previously, which I think has helped. And if you can't make it, we have call-ins, we have agendas in advance. Again, just trying to prioritize that we all need to connect physically and certainly from a communications perspective more often than the organization has before. And I think that's helped quite a bit. Same thing on the road and making sure that we're connecting on the road when we can. The copies, although they were, again, really designed as an introduction and first time, it's open all year round. Anyone can get a copy with me anytime they go through my assistant. They can book it. We'll walk, we'll talk, we'll have a good time. And really, it's also leveraging my assistant, Paula. She's phenomenal. She's someone that took over a few months ago for me, and she is my eyes and ears. And people realize she knows she can get me to where I need to be, and they can get their messages to me. And it's leveraging that engagement. So people realize how important her role is as kind of the key communications person for all of us. So I think that's a big thing. I think the next big thing we're doing is that we're going to invest to redesign our entire office building here. And, we have, kind of the 6-foot plus cubes from the mid 90s. You can't see a lot of people when you're walking around. We have a lot of offices. And so we're going to get into some modern collaborative spaces and really focus on people working together, a place that you want to hang out with, more ambient light, more action, more activity, and more engagement. So we're going to do something physically, which I think will really help our culture as well.
Oh, yes, that's awesome. Yeah, I have a couple close friends and kind of in that space of doing kind of project management work with folks that are looking to redesign with really, really big brands like the Googles and stuff of the world. But workspace does have a big psychological impact on employees, happiness, connectivity. Because a big part of them wanting to stay in an organization is making them feel like they do have kind of a connection to the work that you do, connection to the people that are there and to the leaders who are guiding the organization. So then anytime you can do those things like in that physical space, that's helpful. Breaking down those walls, breaking down those silos, It really helps to get things moving along.
Exactly.
So for the leader that might be listening right now and could be kind of struggling with, either keeping it all afloat and the balance of everything, what would be maybe some words of wisdom for you? I know stuff that sometimes it's custom because it worked for you and maybe it won't for others, but I'd be curious to know what would be your advice to them.
And again, if I speak, especially, I've been fortunate to speak at some universities and different classes around business and sports business and those type of things. But I often, and maybe they chuckle and I preface it that you're going to laugh when I talk about the golden rules. But I got to tell you, for me, it all starts with that, treat others how you'd like to be treated. And I think honesty and transparency and again, really easy traits where you raise your hand first if you make a mistake. But the trust factor for me is in that authenticity. And I think if people can learn to communicate in such a way that makes me want to support them because they're being honest, they're being open, they're lending a little more of themselves than they might in other places, I think that goes to building the kind of trust and relationships that are necessary when adversity strikes. And again, we've had some adversity with our organization this year. It's been another great opportunity for us to learn as an organization, for me to learn as an executive and a leader to say, listen, let's take a deep breath here and let's figure out what we need to be doing to be successful. And let's start by really communicating and over communicating. And I think when you can break that down and people feel like regardless of what happens, I'm comfortable talking to Tim or I'm comfortable talking to a member of the strategy team, it just goes so far in terms of continuing to build on the culture that we'd like to have as an organization. So I really try to, really prompt people to be as honest and transparent as possible. Let people in. Let people get to know you a little bit personally as well. It gives you light years credit when you need it, and I think it's important to do that. So those are some of the things that I often recommend people thinking about.
It's interesting. I had someone on a call, maybe it was 3 weeks ago, and he said that he talked about building the team before you need the team, and he was talking about exactly what you're talking about. This idea of having that trust, that transparency, the authenticity, and you build all that up over the years. And then when, like you said, adversity strikes, that they're going to have your back, even if you don't see them. And in your case, because you're always out on the road, you really have to have that strong foundation of trust so that when they're on the road, if something happens, they can kind of know almost where to go, and they're going to know what your natural inclination is going to be, and they're going to trust that, right? And I think that's critical.
Yeah, I agree with you, Heather. I think a big part of it is they'll know that, you know what, gosh, I think maybe this didn't go what I want. Let me give Tim a quick call. They know that. They know that it's a safe place again to call and pick up the phone and mention that maybe there's a mistake, or maybe something didn't go the way we thought it was or anticipated. That's totally fine, right? That's good communication, and it builds trust.
In that case where they say, oh, I made a mistake, or this doesn't go the way I wanted, let me call Tim. How do you handle this kind of conversation? Do you just start to kind of ask them questions so that they can start to think through their problem? What's your style, I guess, in that regard when you're faced with that thing and one of your team members has gone down the path they weren't happy about?
Well, I try to be a good listener first, and then again, provide some open-ended questions back that maybe they get to their own answers themselves. That way they kind of go, aha, you're right. I did know that. I probably should have done that. But again, letting them kind of talk it through, I think, makes them work the problem to get to the solution. I think that's important. And again, I'm always up for other things such as complaints or things that they don't think are right, as long as they've brought a solution with them. So again, I think trying to let the person talk it out and just trying to prompt and kind of prod them into a way where they figure it out themselves versus me having to give them the final decision, or, me trying to say, well, you should have done this. I try to help them kind of think it through. And I think that provides, again, better two-way communication and a chance to realize that I just didn't jump on them or overreact. And I think, again, that continues to build on our relationship.
One of the things that you said earlier, you're talking about doing kind of speeches, and you bring up this idea of the golden rule. I would love to be able to fly on the wall and see people's responses, because I know, I truly believe that we need to bring our whole selves to the workplace and our whole selves to wherever we're at. That's that authenticity part. There's no reason to be hiding it. I also understand, these ideas around diversity and inclusion, these ideas around making sure that we're cognizant of how other people's beliefs or feelings are. And so this can be a really kind of touchy area. The golden rule is, they put their arms up like, well, wait a second, are we in church? Right. No, but can we maybe have some foundational beliefs about how we're going to treat each other? And those are the kind of things I like to always go back to. That I was talking to someone the other day on another call, and we talked about, even though you want to have different mindsets, different people in your organization that think differently and come from different backgrounds, you still want to make sure that you have kind of standardization of norms and behaviors and values. And again, it doesn't mean that we can't be our own people outside of that. But if we know that we can, like, for example, this idea of trust, authenticity, that we're going to have a safe place to air grievances, or a safe place to tell them, that we made a mistake. If we know that culturally, then it sets everything else for success. And again, we can be individuals outside of that framework. How do you feel about that?
No, I totally agree. And again, I think you asked a minute ago about, what do you do to engage, or how do you build trust with some of your direct teammates? I think your point about, bringing our whole selves is really important. I'm probably, if anything, too loyal. I mean, that's helped me and hurt me probably in my past career. But part of that is when I get to know people. So, a small point would be with my direct reports, and sometimes even an extension of that. Rather, come Christmas time, for me, that's an important time of year for everyone to get a little bit of some mental health and obviously celebrate what we've done together as a group. Rather than, try to come up with presents or gifts for different people, my wife and I always invite my top work people to our home for a party or dinner. Like, bring your spouse so I can thank them for the work that they've contributed. Let's get to know one another socially. And, some people are uncomfortable with that, which is, that's fine. That's their style. But for us, we'd rather bring those people in. They get to know you. Certainly at my party this weekend with our family there, I invited my direct reports, and invite their spouses, and, be part of our lives more than just what you see, like you said, at the work office hours. So I certainly believe in that philosophy.
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's a really great practice. I'm not sure. I'm that leader to that extent. And I love the fact that you have that openness to say my family's around and now I'm going to bring everybody else in. I've done it occasionally, but it's one of those things, even though I consider myself to be a really open and, like you said, a loyal person as well, I do that very well at work. And I don't know, why I haven't done that up until this point, thinking this through, really saying, hey, come over here with all of my family. I've kind of kept it separate. So I think it's a good point that you make, Tim, that, reveal even more of yourself, even in that space. And then they really, that trust, the engagement, the connection is even more put in place. So thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that.
You bet.
So, this has been amazing. I'm hoping the listeners, taking away some really good nuggets. With every show, I always think of a title for the show. So I title it based upon some of the main themes. And so I'll be pondering some of that. And I'm hoping everybody, again, will take away some things. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, they heard something that you said and it makes them want to, reach out, what would be the one way that they could get a hold of you?
Well, listen, I think, LinkedIn has been very successful for me. So if that's a place, feel free. I think that's how we connected at some point through Steve. So happy to use that as a resource and, happy to provide what I can.
Awesome. And what I'll do is, for those listening, in the show notes that'll be on the website too, you can go see more of Tim's bio, of course, his headshot, and then information about how you can get a hold of him, meaning his LinkedIn profile directly. So thank you so much. This has been amazing. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure it's going to be super helpful to everybody else.
Thanks, Heather. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.